It's pretty wild to think about, but the digital world we all live in, the one with smartphones, social media, everything on demand, it was actually born from one of the most spectacular financial train wrecks in modern history. It's an amazing story of absolute mania, total collapse, and then an incredible rebirth.
So, let's start at the heart of it all, semiconductors. These are the brains inside every single piece of tech. In the year 2000, revenue was booming, up an incredible 37%. But then, look at the very next year, a 32% drop. That isn't just a slowdown, that's falling off a cliff.
And wow, did the stock market feel it? The NASDAQ, which is full of tech companies, lost a jaw-dropping 78% of its value. We're talking trillions of dollars that just vanished. It left behind a trail of bankrupt companies and shattered dreams. But here's the crazy part. Hidden in those very ashes were the seeds of the internet we use today. All right, so here's our game plan for today. We're going to start with that dot-com crash, then see how the industry rebuilt itself from the ruins. After that, we'll dive into the smartphone revolution, get a handle on the business of digital, and finally, we'll peek over the horizon at what might be coming next, Web 3.
First up, the great dot-com crash. To really get what happened, we've got to go back to the late 90s, a time of what the Fed Chair Alan Greenspan famously called irrational exuberance. And believe me, it was irrational.
It was a total perfect storm. First, browsers like Netscape suddenly made the web accessible to everybody, not just techies. Then, a new law kicked off a massive spending spree on the actual fiber optic cables for the internet. And on top of that, a tax cut made it really attractive for people to gamble on risky stocks. The result? The NASDAQ shot up almost 86% in a single year. Insane. And the mindset back then, this quote from the Wall Street Journal just nails it. The whole philosophy was get big fast. Profits? Who cares? They called it a quaint idea. Companies were burning through millions of dollars on things like Super Bowl ads just for name recognition. All that mattered was grabbing eyeballs. Actually making money? Well, that could wait. So the whole thing goes up in flames. How does the internet possibly recover? Well, here's the paradox. The crash itself was the secret ingredient. It was this brutal, painful, but totally necessary reset that cleared the deck for everything that was about to come. Just think about it for a second. All those billions invested in laying fiber optic cable didn't just disappear. The companies went bankrupt, sure, but the physical glass cables were still in the ground. All of a sudden, the world had this massive surplus of cheap, super-fast bandwidth. The foundation for our modern internet had been built and paid for by the very investors who lost everything. And this new, cheap, fast internet completely changed the game. It allowed us to move from what we call Web 1.0, which was basically a read-only internet where you just consumed information, to Web 2.0. This was the read-write web. It was interactive, it was social. It's when we all went from being just readers to being creators. But for Web 2.0 to really, truly take over our lives, it had to break free from the desktop computer. And there was one device, launched in 2007, that did exactly that and kicked off a revolution. And the change was just breathtakingly fast. I mean, look at this. In 2011, only about a third of adults in the US had a smartphone. Today, it's over 90%. This wasn't just a new phone. It was a supercomputer in everyone's pocket, always on, and always connected to that cheap, high-speed network built during the bubble. And that unleashed an entirely new economy, an app economy worth over $6 trillion. It created millions of jobs in whole new industries that didn't exist before. Think about companies like Uber, Airbnb, Instagram. None of them are possible without the smartphone. And this table just perfectly illustrates the result. It's a complete rewriting of the global economy. Back in 2000, at the peak of the bubble, the biggest companies were industrial giants like GE, oil companies, big banks. You fast forward 20 years, and that list is completely dominated by the tech platforms that mastered this new world. The old guard was just replaced. But hey, the internet's evolution wasn't all just about social media and online shopping. At the same time, it was quietly becoming this central nervous system for pretty much every modern business on the planet. This professional side of things created a colossal market for what's called enterprise software. These are the powerful tools that run our biggest corporations. Things for managing customers, human resources, complex global supply chains. It's maybe the less sexy side of the internet, but it is incredibly powerful. What's really interesting, though, is that not everybody adopted these tools at the same speed. US companies now spend more than 5 times as much per employee on this kind of software as their European counterparts. That tells you just how central this digital plumbing has become to business in the US. Of course, as soon as businesses moved all their critical operations online, they became massive targets. So cybersecurity had to evolve. It went from being this simple IT afterthought in the early 2000s, just basic antivirus software, to a huge strategic priority today. We're talking chief information security officers in the boardroom. It's a constant arms race. So, we've seen the boom and the bust of Web 1.0 and the rise of the huge platforms of Web 2.0, which brings us to right now and the big question, what's next? A lot of people believe another transformation is already underway. At its heart, this idea called Web 3 is basically a reaction to the internet we have today. Right now, our digital lives and all our data are controlled by a handful of giant companies. The vision for Web 3 is an internet where that control is decentralized, spread out among the users, giving us all more ownership and control. This really sums up the whole journey pretty perfectly. Web 1.0 was the information web. You just read stuff. Web 2.0 became the platform web. You could create and interact, but on platforms owned by big tech. The dream of Web 3.0 is a decentralized web, where ownership and control actually belong to the users themselves. And this brings us right back to where we started. This quote from venture capitalist Fred Wilson is perfect. It reminds us of that central paradox, that crazy, speculative, money-losing mania of the dot-com bubble. It was destructive, for sure, but it also ended up financing the very infrastructure that makes our entire modern world possible. Which leaves us with the big final question. As we hear all the hype and see the crazy speculation around Web3, crypto, and blockchain, are we watching the dawn of the next great digital evolution, or are we just watching history repeat itself with another massive dose of irrational exuberance just waiting for the pop? The answer to that is going to define the next chapter of the internet.